Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy little human being, you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's Morbid makeup video. I'm so happy we could meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this craziness today, you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or BRATTERSTEIN, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the Riverside Myspace murder. In 2006, 24-year-old Crystal Theobald was murdered in Riverside, California, and her desperate family took to Myspace to gather more information, and in doing so, actually helped solve Crystal's murder. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new Morbid makeup video every single week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us. One of us. One of us. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want. They're both BRATTERSTEIN, but no pressure. So guess what, guys? Today's video has a freaking sponsor, bro. Today's video is sponsored by Dossier. Do you remember Dossier? If you are unfamiliar, you're about to get familiar. So Dossier is a perfume company that makes luxury scents at a fraction of luxury prices, because I don't know if you buy perfume very often, but a luxury perfume can cost anywhere from $50 to hundreds of dollars. And I can attest to this because my favorite perfume costs $80. And in this economy, at this point in my life, that's just a little rich for my blood. I don't know what to tell you. I got like animals to feed and bills to pay. Dossier's perfumes range from only $29 to $49, and they offer bulk deals where if you buy 3 or more, you get like 25% off and free shipping, which is just such a great deal and very affordable during this very rocky and uncertain time in all of our lives, because the world is really weird right now, but your perfume doesn't have to be expensive. So of the 2 scents I got this time around, the first one is Fruity Honey, which, oh my God, just smells so good, and it's inspired by Jo Malone's Nectarine Blossom and Honey cologne, and that perfume is $144, which absolutely not. And this one, Dossier, is only $29, which, thank you. And the other one I got is Dossier's Oriental Cherry, which is inspired by Tom Ford's Lost Cherry, and okay, the Tom Ford perfume is $368. I would never. And what the best part is that neither Tom Ford nor Jo Malone are cruelty-free, whereas Dossier is. And I don't know if you know this about me, but that's incredibly important to me because I only use cruelty-free items on this channel, and I only buy cruelty-free items in my life. So Dossier is just a really good fit for me because I want to have very high quality things that are cruelty-free and luxury, but don't break my bank and don't sacrifice quality. With all of that said, I'm happy to let you know that Dossier is offering members of the Brat Pack 10% off with the code BRATTERSTEIN for a limited time, and I think I would take advantage of that if I were you because 1, they're already super cheap, 2, you get bulk deals and 10% off. Like, it's a pretty good deal if I say so myself. So go ahead and click the link down below. I will make sure to list it and use the code BRATTERSTEIN at checkout to try your new favorite perfume. And I just want to say a big thank you to Dossier for wanting to work with me again. That's super duper rad. And of course, a big thank you to you guys because you're cool as hell and are always so supportive of my sponsors. And you know, sponsors are really cool because I put a lot of work into these videos as I'm sure you know, and it feels very cool to be validated. So you guys are cool. You guys rock. Okay, let's go. All right, so now that I'm done spreading the good word of Dossier with you today, we can go ahead and get into the story. So this is a story that was recommended to me by my friend Cherry. Hi, Cherry. Thank you, Cherry. And I had actually never heard of it before, but I was going through my list. You know, every time you guys leave me a suggestion, I put it down on the list. And I was just scrolling through the list, and I landed on this one because I was kind of in the mood to do a case that was sort of close to home. And Riverside, California is an hour from where I live now and also an hour from where I grew up. So it's like smack dab in the middle of my entire life and existence. So I went into that one and I started looking into it, and oh my goodness. This case is just incredibly tragic. It's very sad. This girl who was taken from this earth seemed to have so many people who really loved her and so many people who were just destroyed at her loss, and her family seems to have gone through just so much, and there's a lot to tell here, so I found myself very engrossed in her story. With that said, I'm going to tell you her whole story today, and while I do, I'm going to put on a full face of makeup. If that's not really your thing, thanks for hanging out this long. I hope you find somebody that you like a little bit better, but if you're kind of on the fence like, I don't know how I feel about that, maybe stick around. I think you'll be surprised by how much you like it. So come, gather around, and let me tell you the story of the murder of Crystal Theobald. We're going to begin by jumping in our handy dandy time machine and heading to February 24th, 2006 in Riverside, California, just before 9 p.m. This is when 3 young adults, Crystal Theobald, her brother Justin, and her boyfriend Juan, all jumped into a car together with Juan driving, and the 3 were headed to a convenience store. Now, I couldn't figure out exactly why, but Crystal and Justin's mother, Belinda Lane, was actually in another car directly in front of them, and they were following along behind her. I did see in an interview that I watched in a documentary that Belinda said that she was going to find her other son, Robbie. That's why she was in the car, but I never got complete clarity on that. It's kind of like a weird point. But either way, Belinda Lane in the car here, Crystal, Justin, and Juan in the car directly behind, and they're driving down the road. So the 2 cars come to an intersection, and Belinda in the car in the front, the mama, she pulls through the intersection and ends up stopping. She doesn't keep driving, and it's because she saw a large white SUV parked on the street, and she was sort of sketched out by it. So she sat there to kind of see what was going to happen, wait for the kids, and this is when she saw something horrifying. At that exact same moment, Crystal's brother looked out the passenger side window of the car and saw a hooded man holding a gun pointing directly at their car, and this person just started shooting over and over. Juan, who at this point had actually been shot in the abdomen but didn't realize it, just panicked and booked it and drove off and ended up driving to a nearby grocery store for help. He ran inside, I believe, to get help, and Justin picked up Crystal out of the car and fell to the ground outside of the opening and closing doors, the automatic doors of the grocery store, just cradling his sister in his arms. Crystal had been shot in the back of the head. Justin said of this moment, and I quote, "God said, ask and you shall receive. I did, so where was he?" He also says everything is according to his plan. What kind of fucked up plan is that? Where is the loving God in my life? Crystal's poor family had a little bit of hope after she was shot because she actually didn't die right away. She went into the hospital, but that hope was quickly diminished when Crystal didn't make it. She died in the hospital 2 days later. Now, who was Crystal Theobald? Crystal was the 4th of 5 children, the older girl with 3 older brothers and 1 little brother. Her mother, Belinda, described her as the light of her life. She was her sunshine. She was her life. All she wanted was a little girl. Crystal was a brave girl, a daring girl who loved roller coasters and gambling at the casino and was considered lucky in life, even once winning $38,000 on a slot machine that she had only put $5 in. Crystal was just beautiful and special and hard not to love. To meet her was to love her. She was just a normal girl, a happy girl, a girl who played baby dolls with her young cousin, not passively, but with the attentiveness that opened up the children around her's imaginations, and her loss was a devastating blow to those who knew and loved her. She was married relatively young and had 2 children of her own, I believe 1 son and 1 daughter, but the relationship with her children's father didn't last long. Her ex-husband had an issue with drugs, and his addiction made him violent, so after his last time of slipping back into drugs, she separated from him and was living back at home with her family at the time that she was murdered. So the officer who was taking lead on Crystal's murder case was actually a newer homicide investigator with only 1 murder investigation under his belt, and this murder was a drug assassination that was still unsolved at the time that Crystal was killed. So this officer made it a mission to solve Crystal's murder, not just because, obviously Crystal deserves justice, her family deserves answers, but he had his own ulterior motives. He did not want another unsolved murder under his belt. He did not want to have 2 murders under his belt, his only 2 murders, unsolved. So right away, right after Crystal was shot and police got on the scene, they started canvassing the area, both at the shooting scene and at the grocery store scene. They were just trying to find anyone who might have seen something, might have heard something, but in doing so, they didn't really come up with any useful information. Police obviously also wanted to go and speak with Crystal's family, but the police weren't really welcomed with open arms by Crystal's mother and Crystal's brothers because, according to the family, the police did not treat the family the way that you would expect investigators to treat a grieving family who just literally had their daughter, their sister, shot in the head and murdered. They were more accusatory of Crystal's brothers, and they felt like they were being interrogated instead of being questioned. Crystal's brother, Justin, the one who literally was in the car when she was killed, who held her in his arms while she bled out in front of a grocery store. This guy was even handcuffed, taken in, and interrogated for hours. So, I can see why they wouldn't be super, like, stoked to be speaking to them. I would imagine that part of police's reasoning for being a little rougher with these boys, honestly, is probably because of the way they looked. I think that police looked at them and judged them and thought that they knew more than they were saying, or thought that they were part of gang activity, because at the time that this happened, and probably still just knowing Riverside, this area had a big problem with gangs. Close to the area that Crystal was killed was an area called West End, and this area was notorious for having ongoing turf battles with rival gangs. And for clarity, I'm not shitting on Riverside. I grew up in the San Bernardino County, which it neighbors Riverside, and they're just both not the best areas and have issues with both gangs and drugs. It's just like the facts of the matter, the facts of the areas. So with that knowledge and the way that her brothers looked, I think that they were just judged in that aspect. And it wasn't only the way they looked, for clarity also, because police had looked into the family's backgrounds, obviously, and they found that they weren't exactly squeaky clean. Crystal's brother Robbie had a record, Crystal's brother Justin had a record, and Crystal's mother Belinda had a record. She had an issue with drugs, both using and selling drugs, and apparently, like, growing up, just for like some backstory on the family, Belinda thought she was doing the best she could to kind of like hide this activity from her kids, but according to friends of Crystal's, it was pretty obvious. And for like a silver lining in the story, so that you can feel some sort of happiness, Belinda said that she quit using the day that Crystal died. She said that throughout her life, Crystal always wanted her mother to like quit using, because again, it was a little obvious that she was, and that Belinda was never able to do it in Crystal's life, but in Crystal's death, she was. So that's something positive that came out of this situation. Anyways, with this information, with the history of the family and their lives and the history being in and out of jail, it opened up the suspect pool, because this could now be anyone who had an issue with this family, from personal issues to issues in jail. So though there was a little bit of, tension, a little bit of a rocky start between the family and the officers, they were eventually able to get the family to want to talk to them. And they got some very interesting information. First, from Crystal's brother, Robbie. They were able to talk to him, even though he wasn't there so far in our story. We didn't know about him and his involvement, but once officers got his side of the story, his information, his accounting of that night, they got a little more clarity on what happened to Crystal. Apparently, the night of Crystal's murder, just a couple of minutes before the murder, actually, Robbie was actually at his mom's house, at Belinda's house, sitting out in the driveway in his car. He had an SUV. He was sitting with his girlfriend when a friend of his was standing at the passenger window, and they were just kind of chatting. This is when another SUV, a white Expedition, drove past Robbie's vehicle and kind of stopped and started to turn around. And this is when Robbie's friend got freaked out and was like, I'm gonna go, I'm done with this, and left. And the white SUV turned completely around and shined its headlights at Robbie and his girlfriend sitting in his vehicle. This is when Robbie freaked out. He said he didn't know who these people were and he didn't know what they wanted, but he got some sort of bad vibe and he knew enough that he needed to get out of there. So he actually turned on his headlights and like zoomed the F out of there, going right past them, I guess almost hitting them and hitting a curb, and just took off. And apparently the Expedition flipped around and started to chase him. So they went on a chase for a while, not very long because it was only a couple of minutes, and Robbie ended up actually escaping this Expedition, and he ended up driving off to his daughter's mother's house. I don't know what exactly the situation was there, but he was going, I guess, to see his kid. And when he got there, his ex told him the bad news about what happened to Crystal, because it all happened very quickly. Now, this story may seem a little bit random, but it's going to come into play a little bit more later with corroborating stories of what happened that night. In addition to talking to Robbie, police also were able to speak to Belinda once she was comfortable speaking with police. And this was important because Belinda had actually been on the scene at the time of the murder, so they could get her whole account of what happened and also get a description of the shooter, because she was there, had seen the whole thing, and they could then create a composite sketch. Belinda described the shooter as a young, very light-skinned, almost white-looking Latino young man. With the description of the shooter from Belinda and the police's belief that this murder was gang-related because of the way that the murder went down, the officer started looking through yearbooks of local high schools, maybe middle schools as well. He didn't clarify, just schools, trying to find members of the school who were affiliated with gangs, known to be affiliated with gangs, and fit the description of the composite sketch. I think that came out right. The officer then took his compiled list of individuals who fit the description and he showed them to Belinda, and Belinda actually picked a young man out. She said that she was certain this was the young man who had murdered her daughter. So police then arrest this young man and bring him in for questioning, and this young man's identity has been kept a secret. I couldn't find his name, and even if I could, I probably wouldn't include it, because when they looked into him, he claimed that it was not him. He had no idea what they were talking about, and he was crying, asking to go home. It's actually really sad. I watched part of the interrogation, and he seemed like such a little boy. It was honestly really sad to watch, because he just sounds very young, and he's like, please just let me go home, and he's crying. And it turns out that when looking into his alibi, it was rock solid. It could not have been this boy, which meant that Belinda had misidentified him. Which I get it, this happens. Misidentifications happen all the time, especially when you cross races. That is I'd have to look up the statistics, but it is a lot more common if somebody from one race tries to identify somebody from another race. They're often misidentified, so I get it, but it was problematic for the investigation because now Belinda could be seen as unreliable in her testimony when they actually did get an arrest. It wouldn't be very good for the defense to use her as a witness, yes, this is the person, because the defense could be really? Because you've gotten it wrong before, who's to say you're not getting it wrong again? So this is when the story gets sort of interesting and the family starts taking matters into their own hands. So what had happened is that Crystal's younger brother, Nick, and her young cousin, Jamie, had started kind of looking online to get more information on what happened, because her younger brother, Nick, had heard on the grapevine through the streets that the people that killed Crystal were members of a local gang, and that all of these men that were involved had MySpace pages. Because at the time, everyone had MySpace pages. I don't know if you knew this, but me and my husband actually met on MySpace, but that is neither here nor there. I just wanted to personally connect. I don't know. I just thought I'd tell you that. Moving on. Anyways, in an interview, Nick just sort of said that when you live in the area and you're kind of on the streets, you just kind of hear things and you learn things, and that's how he found out who was responsible and that these men were on MySpace. So, since Jamie was only 14 years old and was very, you know how the youths are very good at the internet of the time? Well, Jamie, being the youth, was very good at MySpace. So she told Belinda, she contacted Belinda and was like, listen, we think we figured out who's been involved, and these guys have a MySpace page. So here's what I'm gonna do. And this little girl straight up made a fake MySpace page. She catfished the hell out of these gang members. She went and found a picture of a girl who she thought would, be a girl that would appeal to these men. She made the fake MySpace page. She named the girl Rebecca, and this is where the whole thing started. Once the page was made, she then went to all the pages of the gang members that were believed to have been involved in Crystal's murder, and she added all of them. She then went to each of their pages and added everyone on all of their top 8s. Now, if you are too young or do not remember MySpace, basically what a top 8 was is okay, so with Instagram, how you follow all your friends, you follow all these people. Well, on MySpace, you would add them as a friend, and then you could take your top 8 favorite people and you could display them on your page. So there would just be 8 people right there to show these are my 8 favorite people. Okay. And then you could put them in any order you wanted to show who was the most important of your friends. And then if a person came to your page, they could see your top 8, they could click on these people and then add these people. I feel like a grandmother, but this was how it worked. And this was a thing that made me and my friends fight all the time, because if we would kind of get into a little spat, my friend would move me to second in her top 8 instead of first. And I'd be like, excuse me, I'm your best friend. How dare you put her before me? It was that kind of thing. Okay. Anyways, by doing this, she was not only adding the men who did it, but adding all of their closest friends and immersing herself in their lives and in all of their friends' lives. This 14-year-old girl then went on to flirt with these guys, to message them, to talk with them. Rebecca, the girl she was being, was the party girl. She liked to smoke, she liked to drink, she liked to hang out. She was their fun time girl. So she would send them messages and just be like, what's up? And they would flirt back with her because she picked a hot picture. And it's funny because as a 14-year-old, she had the presence of mind to like take it slow. Because I guess Belinda was like, ask them immediately, like get all the information. And little Jamie was like, listen, I can't just be like, hi, my name's Rebecca. Have you ever killed anyone? Like, that's not going to work. So she took it slow to try to slowly extract information and not let them be hip to what she was doing. So every day after school, 14-year-old Jamie would get on Myspace and flirt with these guys and try to get as much information as possible. And she'd get some information, but not enough and not quick enough for Belinda's liking. So she actually suggested doing something that I found to be a little odd, and that was making another Myspace page. And this would be one for Crystal. So they made this page and they used Crystal's photo as the default photo. And I thought that this was very ballsy, and I don't quite understand it, but this is what they did. And they named this version, this girl, Angel, with Crystal's photo. And her mom put in the bio of this profile that Angel, Crystal, would be their biggest mistake and their best kept secret, which is very like sneaky and wonderful. And her aim was to not be the party girl, not be like the fun time girl. She was going to be the girl that these men fell in love with. Yep. I just think it's so ballsy because, like, how did she know that they hadn't, like, been watching the news to see who they had killed and could have, like, seen this photo and been like, why is this girl that I killed adding me? But apparently these guys just didn't care and didn't watch because none of them recognized her, which is really sad, actually. Like, they didn't care enough to even see what the person they killed looked like. I don't know. That seems like really, really sad to me. So this page, Angel's page, got a lot of hits right away. And of these men who quickly added and befriended Angel, started talking to Angel, was a man named William Sotelo, who went by the nickname of Jokes. And William and Angel hit it off. They had sparks immediately. They had a spark. Spark. So William was smitten with Angel, who at this point was played by 14-year-old Jamie. They would talk about deeper things, and he was just like falling for her and felt things he never felt before. And this was just like, this was his chick for a minute, which is just so fucking weird. It's a 14-year-old girl. The photo of a girl you murdered. I don't know, it just seems so odd to me. But I mean, all of this ended up working out for the family, so I'm glad it did. It just, I can't imagine. Can you imagine? I can't imagine. Angel challenged William. She flirted with him. She'd give him a little bit, have him grab on, and then put a bunch of slack in it. And she was just like keeping him chasing her. So things finally came to a head where things started to move forward in a good direction for the family when William Sotelo decided he wanted to meet this dream girl of his, Angel. And he was like, listen, I'm having a party. I want you to be there as my woman. And 14-year-old Jamie, as I'm sure you can imagine, shit her fucking pants because she didn't know what to do. So at first she was just like, yeah, let's absolutely totally do that. I'm down. And then when it got to be just like a little bit of time prior to the party, she's like, you know what? Sorry, I can't go. My ride bailed. And this is when William was like, oh, well, listen, sweetheart, I will come and I will get you and I will pick you up. I will be your knight in shining armor and I'll pick you up in my carriage. So Jamie, being smart, was like, okay, cool. What kind of car do you drive so I can be on the lookout for it? And this is when he said, a white expedition. So Jamie calls Belinda, is like, oh my God, this is the guy. Belinda calls police, like, oh my God, I found the guy. And this is where police actually first even learned that the family had been doing this. And they were like, wish you hadn't done it. Didn't it? Wish you hadn't done it, or at least I wish you had brought me in on it. But either way, this is a good lead. And they then bring in William Jokes Sotelo. Sotelo. His name hardly matters. We'll call him Jokes because he is a fucking joke. They bring him in for questioning. So he comes in and at first he denies everything. He has no idea what they're talking about. He's never even been in that area. What? Me? Involved in the shooting? Never. I would never. But police were like, listen, we already know it was you. That's not in question. We have a witness who saw you. So you know what? Say what you want, but that part we already know. What we need to know, if you want us to be able to help you here, is why and what exactly happened. So he starts talking immediately. He tells police that, okay, fine, I was there, but I didn't shoot anybody. And what he says happened that night is that he was out driving around with his friends inside of his white expedition when all of a sudden another white SUV had been sitting there, had shined its brights on them, had driven so close to them, almost hitting them, that they were like, oh shit, we should find out who this is. And they swooped around and started chasing this car, which corroborates Robbie's story from the beginning, if you remember what he said happened that night. He said that in chasing the SUV, finally, he came upon the SUV and another car, Crystal's car. He didn't mention Crystal's mom's car, which is kind of odd. Either way, he says at this point, the SUV, Robbie, started shooting at them, okay? He says that he panicked and he was about to drive off, but one of his friends that was in the car, Lil Huerto, hope I pronounced that right, was like, wait, and jumped out of the car. Jumped out of the SUV, brave as hell. Bullets flying, he jumps out. William says at that point he ducked and he didn't see anything, but he heard shots. He says that when he came up again, he saw that Crystal's car had clearly been shot because it was driving away and the passenger window was shattered. And he says at this point he just drove away and he even left little Huerto there and had not seen him since. So the police were like, oh man, you know, if they were shooting at you, if this white SUV was shooting at you, your vehicle must be like real messed up with like bullet holes, etc. Because like that's how guns work and bullets work. You get shot at, there's going to be some evidence of this. And he's like, yeah, you would think so, but like, no, they must have been just like a really terrible shot. And police looked into this. They investigated his vehicle and they even searched the home belonging to Belinda. They searched Robbie's home, Crystal, and they searched everywhere and no guns were found. This was found to be a bullshit story. But regardless of all of this, they actually let Jokes, good old Joke here, leave. They let him go. And I don't really know why, but they did. They even dropped him off where he wanted to go, but not before he had given police the names of a couple more men who had been in the car that night for more information. In addition to William, Jokes, Sotelo being in the car, there was also Julio, Little Huerto Heredia, William, Little Rascal Lemus Jr., and his brother, Manuel Tripper Lemus. Once Crystal's brothers knew the names of the men involved in Crystal's murder, they, reasonably, I suppose, depending on what you find reasonable, decided that they wanted to take things into their own hands, which police even knew that they wanted to do this, and they sat the boys down, they're like, listen, I know what you want to do. Don't do this. You don't need to do this. It's not going to be good for your family. You don't want to go back to jail, and your mother does not need to lose more children. And according to one of Crystal's brothers, the only thing that stopped them from really like going out and getting some street justice was the fact that they had promised their mother that no more blood would be shed in Crystal's name. So after this incident where Jokes was brought in and questioned by police, he did talk to Angel a little bit after that because he didn't seem to have put two and two together and had realized that Angel was related to him being brought in and questioned. Somehow, he still didn't Google this girl's name. Sir? Hello? Anyways, it didn't last super long though, at least not for Jamie, because Jamie got to the point that this like 14-year-old girl couldn't deal with the trauma of continuously trying to channel the person that Crystal was and to talk to the person that she knew killed her. It was like just too much for her. So she stopped. And this was the point that Belinda took the profile over. And Belinda was not going to take her time. She was not going to move slowly. She was going to get the information that she could as quickly as possible. Belinda found out everything. She found out where they lived. She found out if they had kids. She found out what kind of cars they drove. She would drive by their house and take photos or leave items. She would even buy stuff online that she believed to be cursed Santeria items, and she'd leave them in front of their house. She was really doing the most. She was so ballsy, but I mean, she did believe that these men killed her daughter, shot her daughter in the head, and murdered her. So like, I do get it, but like, I was like, damn girl, you are so brave. So brave. She even called the FBI and ICE to try to get these guys deported, and she even pretended to be part of a rival gang. Like, she'd be in Gang A, and she would tell them that Gang A was talking shit about Gang B, just trying to, like, get them killed by proxy. Like, she was doing it. She was doing what she could, but to be fair, she was going through a lot, so I don't know what I would do in that situation. At one point, when I say she was doing the most, this is an example of her doing the most. And this little story here kind of contradicts Crystal's brother's statement saying that like Belinda didn't want any bloodshed in Crystal's name, because what she did is she told these men that she knew were involved that she, Angel, was going to be having an end of the world party on 6/6/6, so June 6, 2006, and that she wanted them all to come and that it was going to be like a great time. There were going to be car shows and strippers, like it was going to be the party and you had to be there. And basically she planned for this party to be at this place in the desert where when they got there, she planned to ambush them. Her plan was to invite them to this desert party, and then she was going to be hiding in a place where she could see them, but they could not see her. And then she was just going to shoot as many of them as she possibly could before, I guess, getting shot herself. And she says that she was going to be doing this by herself, but she also says in an interview that we were going to get the drop on them. So I think that maybe this might have been like a collaborative plan with the family, but either way. She ended up not going through with it, which is, you know, good for them, because all that's going to happen is she's going to go to jail, you know? She was saying in an interview, just randomly, I just thought of this. This isn't like even part of my notes, actually. I remember watching her in an interview and she said there's a difference. I believe she did. That there's a difference between revenge and justice. One you see from behind bars and one you get to be part of. And I was like, that's a good way. But anyway, so she didn't go through with it. And one night she was having a particularly bad night. And she then got on AIM and started talking to William jokes. And this is the last time she ever talked to him because of how the conversation went. She said to him, "Do you love me?" And he said, like, "Yes, you know I do." And she said in response to this, "Then why did you kill me? I am Crystal. I am the girl you murdered. You don't even recognize me." He never responded to this. And shortly after this, he actually disappeared and he went into hiding for nearly 10 years. So, with jokes gone in the wind, they decided, police that is who they are, that they needed to question some of the other men who had been in the car. And luckily for them, they had the names because Jokes was a big mouth and then ran away. And of these men were brothers, William and Manuel Lemus. So police bring them in and they question them, but they separate them. And after they separate them, they try to convince each of them that the other is talking to sort of get, you know, them to start talking. And it worked, sort of. William was the only one to actually talk at first because Manuel was like, "Listen, well, he didn't say this, but in his brain, he was like, "Listen, I know how important loyalty is to my gang, and I am not going to say anything because that's what I signed up for." So he stays quiet. But William spills a bunch of information, and the two get released, and this is when, you know, Manuel finds out that his brother was talking, and I guess he even ended up, like, him and his gang had a meeting, and the guys were kind of like, "I think your brother spilled. What would you do if I murdered your brother?" And he was kind of like, "Well, I would probably do the same thing you would do if I murdered your brother." And shortly after this, Manuel and William actually fled. They left Riverside and they ran to Los Angeles trying to escape the gang because they knew at this point that they probably had a hit on them. So the brothers are in Los Angeles and they think that everything is good and they're at least safe for the time being. This is when they find out that the gang had actually shown up at their parents' house and lit their family home on fire. And fortunately, their parents lived, but this act of violence against his family was kind of like the tipping point for Manuel, where he realized that he was protecting people who would not do the same for him, who would quite literally do the opposite, try to kill their parents. And though they survived, they lost everything. So Manuel was like, "Okay, I will now talk to the police. You guys did not tell me I had food in my teeth." He sits down with police and he tells them the whole story. He admits everything. He says that the night of the murder, him and his friends had been out driving in that SUV because they were looking to rumble with a rival gang in the area because they had gotten information from another one of their gang members and his girlfriend that a rival gang had shot at them earlier that day. So they were out ready to do some damage, and clearly they were serious about it because they brought like a bunch of weapons with them in addition to the guns that were clearly brought. They grabbed a fireplace poker, they grabbed a bat, they brought like lead pipes and weights and bricks. They were ready to get shit done. He says that during that night they came upon the car that belonged to Robbie and they thought it might have been a member of a rival gang, so they chased him, just like Robbie said happened, and that they lost that SUV. This is when they came upon two cars, the car belonging to Belinda and the car belonging to Crystal and the boys, and that they thought that these two cars were holding members of the rival gang and that they were being boxed in. So that's when Julio Heredia got out of the car and shot them up. As a result of these boys' testimonies, along with the testimony of William Jokes Sotelo, Jokes, big old joke, About a year and a half after Crystal's murder in August of 2007, Julio Little Huerto Heredia was arrested in Mexico. Julio Lil Huerto Heredia, who at the time of his arrest had a baby on the way. There was a girl waiting for him who was 4 months pregnant at the time. Well, he was facing the death penalty for what he had done. But Crystal's family actually asked for the death penalty to be taken off the table, and Belinda said that this was the first good thing that she had ever done in her life. Julio's trial started 5 years after Crystal's murder, and the Lemus brothers testified against him at his trial. And this was very difficult for them because they had actually grown up with Julio. Like, all of them had been friends all throughout their like younger years growing up into adulthood. So this was like a very challenging thing for them and very difficult for Julio's family to see. The judge at Julio's trial said of him, and I quote, "Mr. Heredia is not a good person. He is a violent, cold-blooded murderer, and he is going to pay for what he has done." He was found guilty and he was given life in prison without the possibility of parole. Manuel and William Lemus were not charged at all. It sounds to me, just like the vibe I got, is that they made a deal for their testimony to not be charged for their part in the murder. In addition to Julio Heredia being charged, there was an additional, I believe it was 8 men who were charged with some sort of connection to Crystal's murder with various charges like guns violations and attempted murder, gang things, and witness intimidation. So now let's fast forward to 10 years in the future where police finally tracked down William Joke Sotelo. At the time that he was discovered, he was living in Mexico. He was married with 4 children and working as a chili farmer. William Sotelo was tried 14 years after Crystal's murder, and in 2020 he was sentenced to 22 years for voluntary manslaughter. Belinda Lane, Crystal's mother, actually made a 16-minute long impact statement at William Sotelo's trial, and she really went in on him. She called him like a punk. She called him a loser. She told him she hoped that he got murdered in jail. She even ended up like turning and addressing his family directly, saying that they sucked too because they helped him hide all these years in Mexico, and the judge actually stopped her from talking to them. So this poor family has just been through so much, from like Justin, her brother, having to be in the car when she was shot and like holding her in his arms while she like, bled out on the fucking ground, and just the survivor's guilt from being in the car. I can't even imagine what that's like. And then her younger brother, Nick, ended up, as a response, he ended up actually joining a rival gang, a gang that hated the gang that these men were in. He was just so angry and hurt, and he didn't know how to like process it, and this is how he did deal with what happened. It's just messed up. And then Belinda, not only losing her daughter, but within 2 years, she actually lost her brother to murder as well. Kendall Lane, which is Belinda Lane's brother, was shot and murdered in October of 2008, so just under 3 years after Crystal was killed. And as far as I saw, his murder still hasn't been solved. He was 44 when he was shot, and he left 3 daughters. I did see in an article that Belinda had started a Facebook group that I believe was called Unsolved Murders in Riverside, that aimed to like bring attention to cold cases and unsolved murders in Riverside, California. But when I went online, because I actually went yesterday to try to find it because I wanted to follow it, which I would highly suggest any of you guys do. If you hear about these cases and you know that these families have like groups and pages dedicated to them, I would highly suggest that you go and follow them, because it's just a good way to be active in the true crime community. Instead of just listening to the stories, you could go show the family support, show them that they're not the only people who remember and care. I think that's just a side note here, but it's a great thing to do, to be an active true crime viewer, as Kendall Ray says. And when I searched for the group, though, I could not find it. It doesn't seem to exist anymore. If you know otherwise, and I'm just searching something wrong, if you could let us know down below so that we can all go and follow and show her that we also remember Crystal and her brother, and just show the family support. But anyways, guys, that completes this video. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and it gave you every bit of information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, thank you for hanging out and remembering Crystal with me today, because she's definitely worth remembering. What happened to her is just so absolutely tragic and random. It is the type of thing that could literally happen to anyone, and I think that that's a really scary thought. And it's just, you know, it just makes me really sad to see what all the things that this family's gone through. Her mother, her brothers lost her, her kids lost her, and it's It's really horrible. So I feel so bad for them, but I am glad that they were at least able to get some sort of justice. So. Of course, please let me know of any cases you'd like to see me cover down below. As this case indicates, when you leave a suggestion, I do go through those suggestions. I put your name next to it to give you a shout out because I know that you're filled with good suggestions and good taste. Otherwise, you would not be here. Of course, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell because I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you. And if you want to follow me more consistently, I've got all my social media listed down below. I have a Instagram, a Twitter, a Facebook page, and a Facebook group. Everything is listed down there so you can follow along and hang out. I do my very best to respond to every single person who reaches out to me. And I list all the makeup I've used, the earrings, the nail polish, in case you're curious what all these beautiful neons are. It's all listed down below for your convenience. Of course, I wanted to say one more thank you to Dossier for wanting to hang out and work with me again and continue working with me and continue supporting my channel. That is so cool of them. And now I smell so dang good. And with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world and you choose to be here. That blows my mind, honestly, because there are so many cooler people that you could spend your time with, but you choose to spend it with me. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.